Hey Colin, thanks so much for being part of Great Indian Developer Summit here in India.
Oh, thank you.
We're very glad to have you around. So Colin, can you tell us in a bit about yourself and your role at Official Community?
Yeah, I manage the team building online communities for music artists. We work with a lot of North American and European artists and working towards the global spectrum of getting them online with ASP.NET and the latest .NET technologies within their community.
Alright. So Colin, what is new in IIS 7 that web developers working in CGI-based environments should be excited about?
Lots new. If you're working in a CGI environment, for the first time, PHP really is a first-class language. It has the support and performance needed to do truly scalable web applications within the environment. On top of that, a set of tools and an environment that enables you to debug through problems that are happening, and then just ultimately replace functionality within the web server with the stuff that you need and only what you need, not getting all the extra stuff that you don't need. So there's a lot more opportunity from the extensibility side, and then, like I say, from a runtime perspective, performance, you've got a lot coming at you with the fast CGI. So for CGI-based developers, this is the real opportunity to get onto Windows as far as hosting goes.
Colin, what are the migration pain points to take into consideration when migrating to IIS 7?
When migrating to IIS 7, you've got a couple of things. If you're coming from IIS 5 and prior, there are chances you're going to run into some API issues if you've dug that deep into IIS 5. But for the most part, they've actually built it with backwards compatibility. So you've got a classic pipeline mode which simulates IIS 6 to allow you to get onto IIS 7, take advantage of all the administrative, the tool side, but still maintain your application. And then they've really built in that consideration on how to migrate and built in some good tools to help you migrate the configuration settings. But there really aren't a whole lot of pain points. It's just a little bit of work, and they've spent a lot of time documenting that process and making sure that it's a straightforward process to follow.
Okay. Our viewers would definitely want to understand, Colin, like once the application is up and running, what are the new opportunities that are available in terms of extending IIS 7?
There's a lot more than what existed in IIS 6. In IIS 6, you basically had to know C++, get really good at writing very bug-free code and very highly performing code. Within the IIS 7 framework, they've opened up the .NET development as a first-class language for developers to build on top of IIS 7. So if you don't like the way authentication is being done, or you've got specific requirements, you can completely replace the modules that are a part of IIS 7 with your own. On top of that, you can start to build in new functionality that may be specific to performance around AJAX or some sort of AJAX-specific bits. And you can build that right into the web server, whereas in the past you had to build it alongside, and so you lost a lot in terms of performance, or you had to deal with existing modules in terms of trying to deal with their nuances. Now you can just simply replace them with your own.
Our viewers would definitely want to understand, Colin, like once the application is up and running, what are the new opportunities that are available in terms of extending IIS 7?
With IIS 7, the opportunity really is as open and wide up. In previous releases of IIS, to extend the web server to replace certain functionality pieces, you had to know C++ and a fairly complex process. Where you really didn't have a lot of room for error. In IIS 7, they've opened it up to include .NET as a platform to build extendable modules on. And what this really means is that if there's something you don't like about how the web server operates, you can simply remove the built-in modules and put your own in place. The other thing that it opens up is to take advantage of some of the forthcoming stuff that hasn't been envisioned yet. So if you're doing something really cool and neat with AJAX, and you want to build some functionality into the web server, whether that be doing real-time streaming of data or other types of functionality that are very specific to your application, you can build those in as modules at the web server level and take full advantage of the performance and full fidelity of running within that environment. So I think you've got actually a lot more opportunity, and that's going to allow a lot more people to build on it and deliver new products both for your application but also new tools for the rest of us using IIS 7 out there.
Fantastic. Colin, in the past, production debugging meant writing a lot of tracing code and adding extra logging. How has this scenario changed with the new diagnostics and debugging tools that are available?
What's really changed is they've exposed a lot of what has actually been there for a couple of generations. In the past, when you've been building web applications, you've often written your own logging framework and you've spent a lot of time writing all this diagnostics code so that when you were in a production environment, you could find out what's going on. For some time now, Windows has had a fairly rich tracing framework, and what the IIS team has done is expose that out for all of us as web application developers to latch into. On top of that, they've gone one step further and used the stuff built into the .NET framework, so stuff that's already familiar to us, and built that bridge layer to the tracing framework. So it allows us to use stuff that we're already used to and take advantage of a highly performant tracing framework that we no longer have to write. So the net result is I spend less time on plumbing, more time on building a great web application that I can use right away.
How does IIS stack up against the popular Apache web server? Why would an Apache administrator want to consider moving to IIS server?
As far as Apache and IIS, I mean, IIS is built for Windows. So if you need to host on Windows, and especially now with the fast CGI module in PHP, IIS 7 is pretty much the choice. It's optimized specifically for the environment, does a lot of kernel mode HTTP handling from a performance perspective, takes full advantage of all the features that you get inside the operating system, whereas Apache is trying to deal with multiple environments and has to deal with essentially the least common denominator and doesn't get to take advantage of some of the great new features in Windows Server 2008. So if you're doing hosting in a Windows environment, IIS 7 is totally it. If you're looking from a competitive perspective, I think IIS 7 for the very first time presents really truly a good match to Apache. That ability to rip and replace the modules with anything that you want is truly there, and that's something the Apache guys have had for some time. Now we've actually got it in IIS 7. So you're taking advantage of all the great stuff in .NET. You're getting a lot of the features and functionality that the Apache guys had now within the IIS 7 platform. So I think it's a very competitive product, but if you're on Windows, there's no doubt IIS 7 is the way to go.
Cool, that sounds good. Colin, what is new and important for ASP.NET developers in Visual Studio 2008? And also, can you touch upon what we can look forward to in the upcoming Service Pack 1 and out-of-band releases for ASP.NET developers?
Absolutely. So what's new for Visual Studio 2008? Pretty much the design surfaces where really a lot of us feel Visual Studio 2005 should have been. It's a rich web-aware environment that supports cascading style sheets and managing those within the Visual Studio environment. Allows us to do things like nested master pages, which a lot of us have actually done in previous versions, but we lost the design surface because Visual Studio didn't support that scenario. On top of that, client-side scripting has become the hot new thing. Beyond Ajax, you're seeing frameworks like EXT, jQuery, and a bunch of others. They've taken some of the features that we've been used to on the server side, like IntelliSense and debugging, and built that into the Visual Studio foundation. So now, not only can we work and debug our environment on the server side, but we can perform the same sort of operations on the client side. What's coming up in Service Pack 1 and out-of-band releases? Lots of great things. There's a lot of foundational work around the MVC framework in the routing capabilities of ASP.NET. What routing basically allows you to do is essentially take a request and map it to the appropriate page to handle it. And it's a core piece of MVC. The other out-of-band type releases coming out through Service Pack 1 and beyond are things like the dynamic data services, where essentially you can point your web application at a database and build a scaffolding or an instant application with very little work. So building out those management tools, those kind of quick and dirty applications, or even starting to build applications that adapt automatically to the database are now possible through some of the foundational work that they've been doing. So again, it's that story of they've taken a lot of the plumbing work that we used to build and really added no value to the application as a whole and done it for us so that we can really focus on the specific bits to our application.
Cool. Well, Colin, I'm damn sure that our readers and viewers are going to have a great time listening to your info that you shared across with us. And it was great talking to you, Colin. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. It's great having you.
Thanks so much.